Okay, so I want to do a video on this article that I saw yesterday. It's from 6 years ago, but I think it's an important topic to talk about, so that's why I'm making this video. It's about men being pressured into unwanted sex and how it happens to men and boys more often than people think. You can see the headline: Nearly half of young men say they've had unwanted sex. A new study challenges some widely held assumptions about coercion, sexual assault, and gender. According to a paper published in the American Psychological Association journal, Psychology of Men and Masculinity, 43% of high school and college age men say they've had unwanted sexual contact, and 95% of those say a female acquaintance was the aggressor. Researchers surveyed 284 young men and found that 18% reported sexual coercion by force, 31% said they were verbally coerced into sex, and 26% said they'd experienced unwanted seduction by sexual behaviors. Half of those surveyed said they ended up having sex against their will, 10% said sex was attempted, and 40% said the coercion resulted in fondling or kissing. So first of all, that 43% number surprised me. That's higher than I would have expected. And I'm someone who understands how things that happen to men and boys are often ignored or underreported. But I was still surprised by that 43%. And it shows that this does happen to men and boys more often than people think it does. And one of the figures that really jumped out at me was the 18% who were physically forced into sexual activity. That's almost 1 in 5 of the people who were surveyed. But even when it comes to the verbal coercion, I think there's still a difference in how people perceive men saying no to sex, and when it comes to consent and the whole social standard that men are supposed to want it and men are supposed to say yes. Because some of those cases may have just been the guy saying no because he was embarrassed or he was shy, or he thought maybe his friends would make fun of him, if he turned sex down. But I also think there's a different way that we look at sexual assault and domestic violence against men. Like, we don't take it as seriously in society, or sometimes it's even seen as a joke, or it's even seen as funny. And domestic violence or sexual assault against men is used as a point of comedy in a lot of TV or movies. Like, there's a scene in Get 'Em to the Greek where Jonah Hill is basically sexually assaulted, but it's presented as if it's a funny, comedic scene. But if the same scene was happening to a woman, people would recognize it as, oh, that's obviously sexual assault. But because the scene is happening to a man, it's something we're supposed to laugh at. And just kind of something else to add, this is, of course, an example of the kind of men's issue that affects men and boys of all races. I've been making some recent videos talking about the Black Lives Matter movement and how the men's rights movement is for black men too. And this is an example of the kind of issue that affects black men, and in fact, men and boys of all races. So this is an example of how the men's rights movement talks about things that really affect all men all over the world. And the myth that the men's rights movement is only for white men just isn't true. So thinking about it, maybe 43% shouldn't be a surprise, even though it does seem like a very high number. When you look at how sexual assault and domestic violence against men is perceived and oftentimes not taken seriously or just dismissed, maybe with the social standards that we have, that number actually does make some sense. And it's something that people don't talk about very much, but maybe the fact that people don't talk about it so much is why the number is so high. I put a link to that study and article in the description below. Read it and give me your thoughts below. Why do you think that number is so high?